el cierre anterior y el Dow Jones cae solo un 0,14%. Vamos a saludar a nuestro siguiente invitado, es Ryan Sweet, Chief US Economist at Oxford Economics. Ryan, good afternoon, good morning for you. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.
Ryan, I wanted to ask you in first place about the Federal Reserve. It has a tough job right now. The market has been rallying for quite a few months already. Rates are historically high, but neither the economy or the job market are noticing the impact of these rate hikes. What can the Fed do in this juncture?
Well, they're going to keep tightening. So the way that monetary policy affects the economy is through financial market conditions. And I think the Fed is getting a little bit frustrated because financial market conditions haven't tightened as much as they have, at least historically, when the Fed has been raising interest rates as quickly as they have over the last 12, 18 months. Therefore, I think the Fed is going to err on the side of doing something wrong. They're going to break something. They're going to break the economy, they're going to break inflation, and most likely, which is our baseline forecast, is they break both. They break inflation and the economy, so we'll have a mild recession in the second half of this year.
Today we had the job data on the US. Unemployment rate, for example, is down to 3.6%. It seems like rate hikes, Ryan, still have not really affected the job market. Biden, by the way, Biden has just said it is due to Bidenomics. My question is, how is this possible to have an employment rate in 3.6% after these huge rate hikes by the Federal Reserve? Is it really related to the politics done by Joe Biden?
I think it's still up for debate, but I think in the end, it boils down to the U.S. economy, I think, has become, and this is a lot of research that we're doing, less interest rate sensitive. So if you look at the industries that, we create this business cycle index to put where every industry in the U.S. is in the business cycle, those that are interest rate sensitive, they're struggling, but they're not necessarily in a recession. So I think the overall economy has become less interest rate sensitive over time. I mean, look at the housing market, for example. The housing market is the poster child for an interest rate sensitive segment of the economy. But most mortgage rates in the US are now fixed versus where they were variable, a larger share was variable pre-financial crisis, so pre-2007, 2006. So I think the economy has just become less sensitive to fluctuations in interest rates. And that means what the Fed's going to have to do, they're going to have to push harder on the brakes to slow the economy down to the point where they need it to be. I mean, the job numbers this morning were encouraging in the sense that it suggests that we're still on the path towards a soft landing, but that path is still very, very narrow. The Fed needs monthly job growth south of 100,000 per month to return inflation back down to their 2% target. So we got a little bit of ways to go, and that means that the Fed may step on the brakes a little bit too hard.
Let's be able to get away with the inflation crisis without a recession?
It's possible. I'm not too worried about inflation in the US because when you look at what's driving inflation, and this is why I'm still, this is a little bit of a controversial comment, is that I'm still in the transitory camp in the sense that what's driving inflation is temporary factors. It's not structural changes to the economy in the sense that we don't have, a young population in the U.S., the velocity of money, so how fast money is changing hands, is not rising very, very quickly. In the end, it's Russia's invasion of Ukraine that drove up energy prices. It was the lingering effects of the pandemic that roiled supply chains. And these things are really driving inflation. Rents in the U.S., so homeowners equivalent rent or tenants rents, they're going to roll over in the second half of this year. So I think the Fed is underestimating how much disinflation, so how quickly inflation decelerates in the second half of this year. I think they're underestimating that.
Ryan, the great question is if this historical rate hiking cycle will or will not have catastrophic consequences for the economy. You just said that you think the Federal Reserve is going to break something. You said they're going to break inflation, they're going to break the economy. But can this be hidden really, for example, in what might happen in the commercial real estate, in housing market? I don't know if it's going to be here what they are going to break, what the Federal Reserve is going to break.
Yeah, it's unclear. I mean, my wife hates this analogy, but I think that's a prudent one in the sense that, you know, when the Fed is raising interest rates, it's like the tide going out, and it exposes anyone that's not wearing a bathing suit. And we've already seen that, you know, a few small regional banks in the U.S. weren't swimming with a bathing suit. Therefore, that's just a symptom of, and a cause of when the Fed raises interest rates very, very aggressively, it exposes anyone that's kind of exposed. So the spill-on effects or the secondary effects are, you know, I think we've been trying to quantify it. It's going to be a drag on the economy, not this week, next week, or next month. It's going to be in the second half of this year, or late this year, early next. Therefore, that's when we feel the effects of tighter lending standards in the U.S. And that's probably the most important thing to pay attention to is lending conditions in the U.S. It's not necessarily what the Fed's doing, but what banks are doing, and banks are clearly tightening the screws on lending standards.
Ryan, good analogy, that one. Ryan Sweet, Chief U.S. Economist at Oxford Economics, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you here, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
Bueno, pues nos decía Ryan algo muy interesante, que básicamente